I'm so sorry I can't be with you in person, but if you've got any questions on this presentation, please do get in touch and I'll be happy to answer them. So I'm going to be talking about dog bites, why they're more than just wound care. So a bit about me. I'm an emergency medicine doctor. I'm a senior registrar at Manchester Royal Infirmary. I'm also a qualified dog behaviourist, and I do specialise in reactive and aggressive dogs, and have done quite a few different courses to look at that as well. Pretty much outside of medicine, everything is about dogs. And over the past, well, probably about 12, 13 years now, I've been studying dog bites on a formal and informal basis. So it's very hard to squeeze everything I want to say to you in 15 minutes, but I've got a lot of resources on my YouTube playlist. So this is the QR code that links to it. My YouTube channel is Who Pos Wins. So there's previous presentations there that will give you a bit of extra background from this presentation if you want to dive a bit deeper. So when we're looking at dog bites, we need to look beyond the wound. We need to understand a bit about what breed the dog is, what was happening, was it during play, a look at lifestyle, the education involved in teaching about dog bite prevention, what management strategies were in place by the parents, perhaps if it's a child, a look at the environment the dog is living in. And I'm going to sort of tie that all in with the Royal College of Emergency Guidance that came out in December. Now, it's not a secret, I'm not a massive fan of the guidelines. I do think it's a shame they didn't consult dog professionals when they wrote it, because there are a number of red flags that are missed in the examples that they have listed. And I will go over them and sort of explain some of the pitfalls that could arise when you're looking at dog bites. So usually I always like to talk about a case. This is sort of a recent incident. Jamie Lee Biscoe was killed on the 10th of April this year by the family lurcher. Now, there isn't an awful lot of information out yet about what happened. It was a bite on the neck. It sounds like it was just a single bite. The dog had puppies. Whether or not there was a fight between puppies and she went to intervene and it was an opportunistic bite, not sure. The father went to her aid when he got home and found her on the floor, and I think he was trying to do CPR when he got attacked by the dogs. Whether or not the dog thought it was an intruder and was trying to protect her, or whether the dog had something wrong with them, because obviously that can cause a dog to bite out of character. We don't have that information, but you know, most dog bites that you see will be actually family pets. So you know, do tread with kindness, because it is very shocking to have your family pet bite. And, you know, we hear a lot about irresponsible owners, and there's been some very high profile cases as well, with the case of Esther Martin, who was killed by her son-in-law's XL bully, and, you know, the awful case up in Manchester, in Warrington as well, with the elderly 84-year-old man. But, you know, a lot of bites, the majority of bites do occur from the family pet, and you know, it's not that they've been mistreated, as far as you know, we know from this case anyway. So the majority are preventable, and 91% of dog bites happen in the home with a dog the child knows. Most bites are not from aggression. Play contributes to bites such an awful lot, just accidents, and lack of supervision and poor management is a key factor with bites. So when we're looking at dog biting, and particularly if we're looking at play, we need to look at the predatory action sequence. And so this is the full sequence: scan, orient, eye, stalk, chase, grab, bite, kill, bite, dissect, and consume. And where the dog fits into that action sequence will depend on what we, the human, has bred into the dog through the centuries we've had of dog ownership, and what we've used dogs for in that capacity. So I have gun dogs, so they will retrieve things because that's what we've bred them for. The Dachshunds were bred to kill badgers. So, you know, the lap dogs were bred just to be cuddled. And how enriching we give our dogs life, our dog's life, is dependent on what we actually provide for them. Are we meeting their needs? Are we meeting their genetic needs? Because if we don't, that's when we can have problems. And then we can also have problems because, you know, the dog might have a high prey drive if it's a Dachshund, and so certain games might be quite the dog might see that child's teddy bear as prey, and so accidents happen like that. But then we also have dogs where it's bred into them to have particular traits, and the XL Bully is one of them. So the bull breeds were originally bred in Roman times at gladiator fightings, and then bred for bull baiting. So you wanted a dog that would grab hold of that bull, would be strong enough. And then they were bred with the terriers, and terriers are very tenacious. They don't have they don't orient, they just see the prey and they just go for it. There's no thought involved. It's just very instinctive. And so you've got a dog with a very, very powerful jaw and the tenacity of a terrier. And in the wrong hands, that can be an accident waiting to happen, because a lot of people, and it's not just the XL Bullies, it's the Spaniel owners, it's the Dachshund owners, it's every breed, are not aware of really the genetics involved in their dogs, and so won't meet their needs properly. And that's when accidents unfortunately do happen. And it's all about dopamine. It's all about dopamine, the dopamine seeking, what that dog finds salient. You know, for my spaniels, they just want to retrieve. And, you know, these traits are hardwired into your dogs. They just want to retrieve. Some dogs have a very high prey drive. I know one of my dogs is like that, you know, and it's just hardwired into them. And unless we are providing those enrichment activities, then these dogs are not getting their needs met. And in some cases, in incidents that I've attended with dog bites, is the owners are like, yeah, first of all, they just seem to be playing. And then it was like the switch was flipped, and they're suddenly doing an activity and getting a lot of benefit from it, because possibly those needs haven't been met. And that is quite typical with some of the XL Bully incidents that I have with the bites that I've seen. So when we're looking at dog bites and things to consider, we need to look at the distant and the immediate antecedents. And so these can be things like the environment. Where does the dog live? What's the, you know, have they just moved? Maybe they lived in the country, now they moved into the town. You know, what's going on in the environment? Are fireworks going off? You know, have they been on a stressful car journey? Those sort of things. Nutrition, are they getting their nutritional needs met? Maybe they've just been switched foods, and so their gut health has been fine, or maybe their gut health was really bad, and that's causing them a lot of pain. Physical ailments, pain is a huge factor. 80% of behavioural problems have pain as an issue there. Has the dog got arthritis because they're elderly? What about medical needs? Maybe the dog's diabetic. Maybe they've got some kind of brain lesion. Maybe they're epileptic that could be causing problems. Are there ongoing behaviour issues? Is the dog not getting their enrichment needs met because the owner doesn't quite understand what sort of their dog needs? You know, have you got the wrong dog in the home? Are there behaviour traits that the owner's not really addressing? All these things can have a massive impact. And then there's also the link with crime. You know, there's a huge link with organised crime with some of these really horrendous dog bites, particularly when dogs like the XL Bullies are involved. You've got dog fighting, you've got dogs used for status, you have cuckooing, where a vulnerable adult will be made to care for these dogs. So you might have some really gentle little old lady coming in with a dog bite, and it's all very innocent, you know, because it's her grandson's dog, but actually she's a victim of organised crime, and it's actually not her grandson, and it's cuckooing. So these are just some things to be aware of. The Dangerous Dogs Act states that it is illegal to own, sell, breed or abandon certain types of dogs. And dangerously out of control applies to all breeds. And the dog doesn't actually have to bite for a dog to be classed this. It just has to make someone fear that they could be injured. And it applies everywhere, even in private homes. Now, the offences can be public liability and owner responsibility, so from a criminal point of view, but also strict liability under the civil law as well. And so you are held strictly liable for damage or injury a dog causes, and so you may have to pay compensation. So let's just sum up the guidelines and put this all together. So there's currently no statutory obligation upon NHS staff to report all dog bite injuries to the police. I know there are quite a few trusts who either have this in place as 100% or they're pushing for this. And I certainly am a big fan of 100%. And I hope some of the stuff that I speak about will explain why. Dog bites should be reported to the police as there's ongoing significant risk to the public. Now, I would say to you as a clinician, you don't know, you don't have all the facts. You're not a dog professional. And it's very difficult to make an assessment with the information that you get from the patient. Obviously, we do have the issues of confidentiality and weighing it up. So let's just look at an example. So Mark is walking his dog Max. Whilst doing so, he comes across another dog walker friend, Nick. Nick's dog Gruff is running wild round the park whilst Nick attempts to recall him. Gruff runs up to Mark and begins to attack him. So runs up to Max and begins to attack him. Mark steps between them to intervene and is bitten by Nick's dog on the calf, sustaining 4 puncture wounds from teeth but no tissue loss. He attends the emergency department. Mark is not keen to report the bite as he doesn't want to upset his friend should this be reported. Well, there's a number of red flags there. So first of all, the dog is running wild. So you could argue the dog is dangerously out of control. We have no knowledge what breed of dog this is at all. And, we don't have enough information here to really know what's going on. But the police will, because there may be lots of incidents of a dog having caused problems to other people in the local area, but we don't have that information. So Mark is likely to want to maintain confidentiality. So he tells you that Nick's dog is often poorly behaved, is difficult to control and has bitten other dogs before. So this indicates a pattern of behaviour with a non-specific risk of future biting of other dogs. There's probably not enough risk to warrant reporting to the police, the guidelines say. I would disagree most definitely here. So the dog's poorly behaved, is difficult to control this and is bitten other dogs. So this is a dog that is out of control. So the police would want to know about this. And so there is enough information. And again, we don't get all the full information. We don't know whether or not this dog has been a risk to the public before. We just don't know. We don't have that information. So this is something really should be reported to the police. Mark subsequently discloses that in fact he was bitten by his own dog and not Nick's, which is why he doesn't want the bite disclosed. It's never happened before. On direct questioning, you find that Mark has another dog, Duke, at home who has bitten him previously. Mark lives with his wife and 3 children, aged 2, 5 and 7. There is no history of either dog biting any of the children. There is a potential risk to the children created by living with 2 dogs who have bitten humans in the past, the guidelines say, and there is no evidence of neglect or abuse of the children. But there's a number of red flags that unfortunately the guidelines haven't picked out. So first of all, we don't know what breed of dog this is at all. There is obviously kids in the home, and they said it's never happened before that we know of. The NHS, unfortunately, we don't have joined up writing. And so, this family could have been hospital shopping. We don't know how long the dog's been with the family. Maybe the dog's been bought on Facebook and the dog actually matching that description has caused significant bites in the past. We just don't have that information, but the police will. And so it's very difficult for us as clinicians to really make a balanced judgment on this. And also I would argue that I've got years of training in dog behaviour and you don't, and it's putting a lot of pressure on you to make a decision. So the guidelines go on to say a judgment should be made of the risk to the children. The clinician should explore the circumstances of previous bites and may decide to submit a safeguarding concern. Do you know all the information you need to ask? I would argue no. So later that week, Mark's 7-year-old son is seen in the paediatric emergency department with a dog bite. Mark reports that Ben was playing with Duke, became boisterous with him and pulled his tail. On direct questioning, it is likely that this was not directly witnessed by anyone and that Ben was unsupervised with Duke. Duke snapped at Ben and caught his finger, which is bruised but does not have broken skin. This is the 3rd bite from the same household, 2 of which required emergency department care. A safeguarding referral should be made for all 3 children. Now, I would argue if the safeguard referral had been made earlier, the child wouldn't have been bitten. Now, we don't have the information to explore the circumstances. You don't have the training, and also the dog owner may not actually understand what is going on because they're not skilled in dog behavior. It's also, there's a bit of a red flag with the child not being supervised, the dog being boisterous with the child. Again, the owner's not understanding probably what's going on and able to give us a balanced amount of information to be able to, for us to make a judgment. And again, we don't know what breed of dog It is. So the next example is 2-year-old Daisy is brought to the emergency department with a superficial wound to her right foot. Her father tells you that she stood on the paw of the family's elder dog who was asleep, and the dog gave her a nip. The dog has never bitten anyone before and has always played well with other children in the family. There are no previous attendances for anyone in the household with dog bite injuries and no other concerns regarding Daisy. A safeguarding referral is not currently indicated. Now, I would disagree here because, again, we don't know the breed of dog. We know that the dog is elderly, but do the family actually understand that this dog's probably in pain, and the little girl's waking the dog up and standing on the dog's paw was probably causing it to have pain? And unless the family really understand that, this dog could go on and bite. The dog also may have been brought on Facebook 2 weeks before and actually has a history of biting. We don't have that information there. Now, as far as we know, there's no previous attendances for anyone in the household, but maybe they're hospital shopping. We don't have that information. And so I would actually disagree that a safeguarding referral is not currently indicated. I think it should be, and it should be reported to the police. And that's what I would do. I would be reporting. And I always say, you know, it is just my policy. And I make it clear it's my policy to report dog bites to the police. It doesn't mean you're going to be investigated. It doesn't mean you're going to lose your dog or anything. It's just for safeguarding, you know, in case, you know, it might prevent another child getting bitten. You know, it's just for a safety thing. And generally, I've not found any problems with, you know, people being told that information. So key points to take away is that breed plays a huge role, but nurture, education, supervision, management is also important to consider. And don't forget the fact that, you know, there might be crime involved, and, you know, remember the cuckooing. And, you know, facts may be declared or they may be unknown by the patient with potential far-reaching consequences because, you know, a lot of the time when the human's being bitten, a couple of weeks later, a child gets bitten, and fatally. And so actually, if we can preempt that with some safeguarding and maybe police involvement, you know, we can actually stop some of these devastating injuries and deaths occurring. These are just some resources that you might want for more information. Really good book, The Canine Commandments by Dr. Kendall Shepherd. If you've got any questions, please feel free to get in touch and I will be happy to answer them. Thank you.